And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. It could be said that Ernest Sandy came to Terrace in 1944 due to the newly opened section of Highway 16 linking Prince Rupert to Terrace. Whatever the reason, within a few short years, Ernest formed Sandy Lumber Mills Limited, where he and his family operated it until 1965. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story about an overpass named after his family.
It's 20 years old, several hundred feet long, and sits smack dab in the middle of Terrace. It's called the Sande Overpass, the name taken from a sawmill that used to exist in the vicinity. On any given day, some 12,000 vehicles use the Sande Overpass to get from one side of the CN rail tracks to the other, making it one of the busiest intersections in the Northwest. And according to many people, that traffic statistic also makes the Sande Overpass one of the region's most dangerous traffic spots.
I would say it's the worst of the ones that I have to be concerned about.
Terrace RCMP say they have to respond to more traffic accidents at the Sande Overpass than any other location in the area. There's been 24 accidents at the overpass in the past 3 years. It's a traffic hotspot for the RCMP.
Oh, definitely, especially with the big trucks going over that overpass and with the shopping center being at one end of it. That's what I feel is a very dangerous situation, and we have drawn that to the attention of the Department of Highways when they requested information from us on dangerous intersections, and we were already advised the city on that.
Nobody has to tell the city of Terrace the Sande Overpass is a hazard. For 4 years, the mayor and his council have been pressing for something to be done about the overpass. They say it's just too dangerous.
Well, that's always been a concern of ours. There have been a number of accidents on this overpass. Virtually all of them have involved large trucks. There have been a couple of fatalities, and we don't want to tolerate that situation any longer. We want to go ahead and build this overpass as soon as we can.
The city wants a new overpass built, one that will take heavy truck traffic away from the Sande Overpass, which the mayor says wasn't built to handle the big trucks of today.
This overpass was built about 20 years ago or so, and it was mainly designed to alleviate the heavy traffic of ordinary motor vehicles on Calum Street. You know, in the meantime, trucks have become more frequent. They've become bigger, and they've become longer and wider, and the approaches to the overpass are pretty well right-angle turns, 90-degree turns. And it's just, in our estimation, it's no longer safe for larger trucks to roll over this overpass or come along this overpass indefinitely. And we feel that something should be done that would allow a truck route to go through Terrace, and perhaps a better designed overpass for large trucks be built in the west end of town. And this overpass would still remain an overpass for ordinary vehicles.
The Terrace mayor has an ally in his contention about truck traffic on the Sande Overpass, a man who drives the big rigs for a living.
We didn't have the chips then, and we didn't have the lumber volume going. We didn't have B trains, you know. So it's just growing and growing and growing. So it's just an overworked thing now. It's too much traffic.
Besides the volume of traffic using the overpass, detractors also don't like the structure's design. There are right-angle turns at both ends of the overpass, and the sharp corners increase the likelihood of accidents.
And what happens, you got two corners. You got an S turn right in the middle of the town, you know, and sooner or later some guy is going to be walking on a little too much, and over he goes.
And that's exactly what happened one spring day a few years ago. A loaded logging truck took the corner too fast, tipped over, and the logs spilled over the sidewalk and down the bank. Tragically, a young Terrace woman was walking the overpass at the time. She was struck by the logs and killed. That incident spawned quick response about the safety of the overpass. The city sent off a flurry of letters to the Highways Department demanding an alternate truck route through Terrace be established and that the approaches to the overpass be redesigned. The RCMP agreed, saying public safety would be greatly enhanced if commercial traffic were channeled to an alternate route. The police inspector also said the grade and curve of the approaches encouraged truck drivers to maintain speed on the corners to allow easier ascent of the overpass, which further compromised safety. The terrace coroner, following his investigation, concurred with the police recommendations, and the Northwest Loggers Association added its name to the list, demanding improvements to the Sande Overpass approaches. The Highways Ministry responded. More than a year after the death of the young woman, work began on a $250,000 project to widen the approaches, increasing the turning radius to allow easier movement of the big trucks. The improvements helped, but many people think they didn't solve the problem.
Anytime you turn a corner, you're open to some guy that's going too fast, and that's really what has happened in every case that has flopped over there. They've been going too fast. So you make the corner better, and then what happens? They'll be going around there 50 kilometers an hour instead of 35. So the thing to do, keep it going straight.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thanks for staying with us. This past summer, the CEO of Sand Group expressed an interest in building a sawmill in Terrace to process wood the company already acquired in the area. Camille Samhara stated it would need between 40 and 50 acres to build a mill producing 50 to 60 million board feet of lumber a year. Let us return to the archives as former Highways Regional Director shares some concern regarding lumber trucks.
From his office, the Highways Regional Manager can look over to the Sande Overpass and see the passing logging trucks. John Buckle agrees there are traffic problems at the overpass.
I think it's fair to say that, because of the two sharp curves on either end of the overpass and the fact that there is a grade there that at certain times of the year, and not just in the winter time, that obviously trucks do occasionally get into problems, and therefore there is the potential of accidents occurring at that site.
Does the Sande Street overpass meet all the criteria for highways overpasses in BC?
Well, I think the structure was built approximately 20 years ago, and if we were looking at doing that same thing today, we might have come up with a different configuration. At the time, it was certainly considered to be the state of the art. But I think now, looking at that structure, we would probably come up with something that might be considered a little more advanced in its safety aspects.
Along with the safety problems at the overpass associated with the approaches to the structure, the city also feels there's problems because of the overpass location. It's in the center of the community. If there was an accident involving hazardous cargo that required the area to be evacuated, it could create a huge headache for emergency officials, and there's no shortage of hazardous cargo.
You've got natural gas, you've got propane, you've got oxygen, you've got gasoline, you've got diesel, chlorine to a certain extent, some radioactive material. Like I said, you virtually name it, compressed gases.
Ray Tank is the emergency coordinator for the area. His job is to oversee the response to emergency situations, including the evacuation process.
If we happen to have an incident that should occur on the overpass as such, that would be the epicenter of our incident. And depending on the information received from our initial emergency response guide as to suggested evacuation distances, we have identified 100 meters, 500 meters, and 1,000 meters. And within those circled areas, you can see from these various dots that those are our high-density population areas, such as the Skeena Mall, the Woolworth Mall, a hospital, the co-op, and also within those areas are some of our emergency response agencies, ambulance, fire department, etc.
And there have been close call incidents involving hazardous cargo on the overpass. The most recent was in January, involving slippery roads and a tanker truck carrying some 50,000 liters of jet fuel and gasoline. The driver couldn't make the turn, and the big rig slid over the embankment. Police say there was nothing the driver could do to prevent the accident.
The conditions were such that despite his best efforts, there's nothing he could do about it. And When you have trucks like that, loaded with fuel or with logs or whatever, and they can't control their vehicles, then we have a potential for a real disaster, especially being in the heart of town.
Fortunately, the fuel did not leak from the tanker. Still, 14 firefighters and the pumper unit were tied up for 4 hours, while the fuel was offloaded from the tanker. A similar incident a number of years ago was more serious. Then the fuel did spill out, and a backhoe had to be used to dig a ditch to contain the liquid and stop it from flowing towards the hospital, just a block away. It's incidents like these and the close proximity of the hospital to the overpass that concerns safety officials.
The potential to evacuate the hospital was there. We have information from a book put out by Canutech in regards to dangerous goods, and an incident involving a gasoline spill of that quantity, or that potential quantity, would have entailed the potential consideration of evacuation of the hospital, yes.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. The actions taken in the initial minutes of an emergency are critical. A prompt warning to employees to evacuate, shelter, or lock down can save lives. A call for help to public emergency services that provides full and accurate information will help the dispatcher send the right responders and equipment. Let us return to the archives as former emergency service coordinator shares his concerns.
Within 500 meters of the overpass are the police station, the fire hall, and the ambulance station, all emergency services that would likely respond to an incident on the overpass. But those buildings might very well themselves have to be evacuated because of an incident, and that could hinder the ability of police, fire, and ambulance officials to respond to an accident.
Yes, I'm definitely concerned. However, we have addressed the problem to a certain extent. We have recognized that the potential for a disaster does exist, and self-contained breathing apparatus such as Scott air packs are available to some of the agencies so that their emergency equipment can be obtained. For example, with the ambulances, we have at least taken into consideration the fact that we would have to send somebody in with a self-contained breathing apparatus to remove some ambulance.
And of course, shutting down the main traffic route in and out of Terrace creates other evacuation problems.
The through traffic is going to be blocked, it'll have to be rerouted, and it could create some major problems for just traffic congestion and traffic flow, period, especially for some of your emergency vehicles.
The Terrace RCMP also sees safety problems associated with the location of the overpass.
Definitely, most definitely. Because there's too many people that have to access that intersection and that shopping center. That's on a Friday and a Saturday, our two busiest days. In the daytime, there's far too many people there. If we had a tanker truck go over the end and bang into the back end of that shopping center, we'd have a major fire, a major disaster.
One of the arguments put forward to reasons why we need a second overpass in Terrace is because of the location of this first one. Do you think it is in a sensitive location?
I think there's no question that right now it's in a sensitive location from the point of view that we have our major truck route in the northwest passing, within a short distance of the hospital, adjacent to a major mall, and with prospects of further development right in that immediate area. I think it obviously is not a desirable mix to have those heavy trucks with various cargoes passing that close.
And so if it's not satisfactory to have thousands of heavy trucks crossing the overpass because of safety hazards with the right-angle turn approaches, and because of the location of the overpass, why not have truck traffic use an alternate route? Well, the alternatives are also less than satisfactory. The alternative to the Sande Overpass is Kenny Avenue, and some trucks do use this route. But the road swings over the rail tracks at a level crossing, which in itself is a bad proposition. And there are other factors which make Kenny Street unsuitable for a commercial traffic route.
I know the pole trucks, for instance, use that crossing. But the only reason we don't recommend it is because you cannot put a truck between the track and the highway and stop it without being either across the track or onto the highway. You know, there isn't enough room in there.
The railway tracks run parallel and very close to the highway, so close that often trucks that are stopped, waiting to turn onto the highway, are sitting right on top of the train tracks. In fact, the railway arms have often had to be replaced after coming down on top of trucks and being snapped off. And if the big trucks aren't sitting on the tracks, they could be sitting with their trailers jutting out into the line of traffic because of the tight space between the tracks and the highway. And as highway officials point out, there are other reasons Kenny Street is not suitable as a truck route through Terrace.
You've got several right-angle turns. You've got the interfacing with traffic at intersections that are not controlled with traffic lights. So there's a number of issues there. You've got city streets that are not built to the extent that the highway is built to withstand the heavy loads and those turning movements. So there's all kinds of good reasons why it's obviously not desirable to route all the traffic onto those streets.
And so if there's safety concerns about heavy trucks using the Sande Overpass, and just as many concerns about commercial traffic using the alternate route, what's the solution? Many people think the answer is a second overpass, away from the center of town.
That would be the ideal answer. Relocate it, create a better design, and hopefully it'll serve to everyone's benefit.
We would like to see it taken away down the other way, west of town, so trucks are going through that whole busy area, which is going to get worse in absolute straight line. They don't turn at all.
I'd like to see a truck route that follows right along Keith Avenue and come out either at Brown or Frank or some other place further west. You'd probably have to build an overpass, which is a very expensive thing, of course, but that would be the ideal thing, to get the big trucks away from the center of town. And then we wouldn't have the same risks.
This year, we're treating this matter as one of our top priorities within the city of Terrace. We're going to make a real concerted effort in Victoria's to see if we can't get the green light for a new overpass.
The Highways Ministry is aware of the safety concerns with the Sande Overpass and is considering a second overpass. But the project is not high on the ministry's list of priorities. Before the green light is given to a second overpass, the ministry wants to undertake a comprehensive study of the Terrace traffic corridor.
Our feelings are, before we jump to the conclusion as to what the best option is, that we need to really put all the facts and the information together in a proper report, which would probably be undertaken by a consultant, and then explore which the preferred option would be with all the various parties that would have an interest.
There should be a comprehensive plan for traffic through our community, but I don't think it should take a great deal of time. There have been studies ongoing. The Ministry of Transportation has been looking at this for a couple of years now. I think it's just a matter of putting all the information we have together and to move on it very quickly. I see no reason why we can't get started in some stage, whether it's design stage or whatever, by the fall of this year.
There's been a lot of changes in the 20 years since the Sande Overpass was built. The area has grown, and so too have the demands on the overpass. There's more traffic, and the trucks are bigger. There's problems with the design of the approaches to the structure, and there's problems with the sensitive location of the overpass. But building a new overpass will cost money, several $1 million. It's not a big expense out of Highway's billion-dollar budget, and according to Terrace City officials, it's not an expense that should stand in the way of a new overpass.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
One of the most important programs that fall under the mandate Environmental Response Systems is Canada's Marine Oil Spill Preparedness and Response Regime. Transport Canada is the lead federal regulatory agency responsible for the regime, which was established in 1995 and is built on partnership between the government and industry. In this final segment of Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1994.
Well, a scenario is that there's a freighter in the harbor that's leaking some oil. So there's a spill, and it's drifting, and what we want to do is protect some beach and a creek. And how we're going to do that is by booming off parts of the beach here. This is a boom. And then down here we're doing what they call deflection booming. And then later on we'll also be trying to skim some of the boom in this sweeper system here. So those are the three sort of major activities that we're going to set up today. It's an operational exercise, and we want everybody just to get better at what they do.
Besides Coast Guard personnel and officials, the operation was also watched by representatives of other interested parties. Coordinator Brian Hennessy.
Today we're involved with the Canadian Coast Guard, of course, and we also have Bard Clean, the contractor from Vancouver Port, and the Canada Port Corporation. And the DFO, Department of Fisheries vessel, is acting as our observer platform.
Understand as well that a couple of the mills are involved?
Yes, we have some people from observers from Alcan and also from Repap, the pulp mill here in town. They've actually, both of these men have taken the course, the Basics of Oil Spill Response course, previously to this, and they've come out to observe the exercise.
Before any cleanup operation can begin, supplies must be flown in by helicopter. Supplies such as oil booms are brought in this case to personnel set up on the beach. Smaller boats are then used to transport the crews to shore to begin the deployment of oil booms. As Public Affairs spokesperson Rod Nelson explained earlier, several pairs of boats are needed to set up what's known as deflection booms. We told you earlier that one of the reasons for the simulated oil spill was to prepare Coast Guard personnel. The other, for Coast Guard officials seen here, to observe the practice exercise and see what works and what doesn't. Back on the beach, Rod Nelson tells us that crews are beginning the task of unraveling oil booms.
Well, what they're going to do is they're preparing to use this boom that you see there, the orange boom. They're going to get a helicopter to come in and lift the boom out and bring it out towards us here. And then they'll hook it up to a vessel, and then eventually they'll anchor it.
To allow us to see the operation be completed from the air, we're taken back to the Coast Guard base in Seal Cove by boat and flown by Coast Guard helicopter back over the site to see the operation complete. While Brian Hennessy had earlier predicted that the practice exercise might take between 3 and 4 hours, it really only took about 2.5 hours. The weather, however, did play a considerable factor in the quickness of the exercise. It's hoped that a simulated oil spill exercise will be held once a year to keep Prince Rupert's Coast Guard ready in the event that an oil tanker en route to Alaska really does run aground and spill oil.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.